Okay.
Okay.
Go. Hello and welcome to the meditation conversation. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and today I am delighted and honored to be joined by Barbara Lamb. Barbara is a UFO researcher, and she's worked with thousands of experiencers of ET encounters as a psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, and regression therapist. She's also an author and has authored or co-authored books such as Meet the Hybrids, Alien Experiences, and Crop Circles Revealed. So it really is such an honor. Thank you so much for being here, Barbara.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm delighted to be with you. And very quickly, I would like to add in that there's a fourth book.
Is there?
Like mentioned, and that's a book for children about children's extraterrestrial experiences.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think it's the only book in the world of its kind. And it's wonderful. It's full of illustrations and about different kinds of things that children whom I have worked with find in their extraterrestrial encounters.
Wow.
So we've got about 21 different kinds of encounters, different kinds of beings, all illustrated fully by an artist from descriptions from these children. So that book I like to have people know about, because if there's any idea that maybe an adult's child is talking about being visited at night by unusual beings, or giving lots of hints that these sorts of encounters are happening, and the adult usually doesn't, in many cases, doesn't know anything about this, so they tend to wave it off and say, "Oh, you have a wonderful imagination.
Yeah.
Well, that must be your imaginary friend." A lot of adults have heard of that. So anyway, if the adult sits down with the child and they look at and read this book, there's not much written text. It's mostly captions under the pictures. We let the pictures tell the story, tell about these different beings and different kinds of encounters. So if the adult is sharing that with the child, that can really open up conversations between the adult and the child. And the child, very often, we've tested it out with children. Some children have had no experiences with this sort of thing at all. And that just starts a very interesting discussion between the child and the parent or grandparent or babysitter or whomever might be looking at the book with the child. And sometimes the children who have had ET encounters, the child will say, "Oh, look at that. Yeah, that's the kind that used to come into my room at night," or is still. Yeah, every now and then that one comes in, and that one too. I know that somehow I know that one. So that really opens up the child's awareness and gets some validation for the child. I think that's extremely important.
Absolutely.
Because usually nobody believes the child. If the child tries to speak about this. And then it opens up a whole line of communication between the child and the adult who is
beautiful.
reading this with the child. So anyway, we think it's a real service that there is this book. So the name of the book, and it's available easily on Amazon, a hardcover version and a softcover version and a Kindle version. So it's kind of a long title, but it's Kids Adventures with ET Friends in Space. Kids Adventures with ET Friends in Space. So if anybody wanted to just sort of look it up on Amazon, you could just type in ET Friends. And that would most likely take you right to it.
Yeah.
So that's
Super cool.
newest venture.
Yeah.
Came out in 2020.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for alerting us to that. That's that, like you say, I mean, what a beautiful tool that
Yeah.
that can be, because that's one of the things where, and we'll talk about this with your work, because it's so much of it is working with the subconscious, because we don't hold the memories in our conscious mind, or, you
Yeah.
know, or we've been, potentially tried to share it and it's been, oh, that must have been a dream,
Yeah.
or, and so it's like, oh, okay, I guess it's not possible. So it must have been something else. And
Right. Anything but reality.
right.
So it's taken probably all of us, adults, teenagers, children, uh, it's taken us quite a while to get used to the fact that there is this sort of thing happening for many, many people. Not for everybody, for sure, but many people are having extraterrestrial encounters and have had extraterrestrial encounters. So it seems to be a lifelong association, shall we say, between a person and the beings who come
Yeah.
visit and take the person away for various experiences.
Yeah.
And, it's been so clandestine in the sense, I don't mean that in a negative way, really, but the beings have, all of them, it seems, have made real attempts to have the person not disturbed by the beings coming and removing them for an hour or two, which is typical of this sort of thing. And so they do whatever they can to have the person not be aware, or anybody with the person not be aware. And it's so amazing to me the effects that they can render. So when they come to a person who's in close proximity, even in the same bed as somebody else, that other person is what we call switched off. And basically, they are just made to, they're perfectly okay, but they're just made to be out of conscious awareness. Again, they're not harmed in any way, but they just have no conscious awareness of what's going on in the room. And so the person seems to be very deeply asleep and unable to be awakened. And then, of course, the person being visited very often is made to be totally not aware of it. But with many, many people, they have just a few moments of awareness that there are other beings in the room, and aware that they cannot move and they cannot call out. But even if they could, the person in the room with them, or even in the bed with them, would not respond, because they're just so deeply out of conscious awareness during that time. And then when the person is returned again, which might be an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours, that person usually is aware, oh, I'm back, I've been gone somewhere and I'm back in bed. And then the other person in the bed might kind of turn over or wake up. And I mean, of course, it's usually the middle of the night, so they don't have much of a conversation.
All right.
So there are many children whom I have worked with. I have regressed, or they've been adults when I've regressed them back to a childhood experience. And very often there's a brother or a sister sleeping somewhere in the room, maybe in another bed. And that one is completely unaware that anything has happened. But the one who experiences it might be aware for just several moments, maybe at the longest, a full minute. And so some people wake up and they have a sense, often a sense of presence in the room. And then they'll open their eyes further and really look around, and then they will see beings. It might be one or two or three beings. And then if they're still conscious to some extent, they're aware that they cannot move. That's kind of frightening for people. And I mean, it turns out to not be bad, and there's a purpose for it, but it can be frightening for a person. And then very typically they feel themselves rising up in the air. In other words, they're being levitated, floated up over the bed. And then if they're still consciously aware, they'll be aware that then they're floated across the room and right through a wall or the ceiling or a closed window.
Wow.
And how the beings can do that, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows, but they have ways of doing this. So they too go through the wall or the ceiling or the windows, and then the person might be aware still enough to realize that they're moving through the air. And so usually that's about as far as they get in their conscious awareness of these experiences. But in regression, when somebody wants to know what happened at age 6 or age 49 or whatever, there are little clues that they remember that make them wonder. And when we do a regression to one of those experiences, then every single detail of that experience from the very first moment of waking up and being aware of right through the entire experience, all of that comes up.
Wow.
So when I do a regression with a person, I suggest to the person that he or she is back there in time at that experience that they had been wondering about. They might have a few clues of that, something mysterious happened that I wonder what that was. So we'll go back to that time as if they are there now, as if they are the 6-year-old child or the 49-year-old adult or whatever. So it's like they're reliving it here and now rather than looking back on it. And I think that I have found that that is very, very important, because if you have this sense that you're reliving it moment by moment and you don't know what's ahead, you don't know what the next moments will be, it seems much more authentic and we get much more detail than if we're looking back and talking about something that happened in the past. So I always use that method and remind them, you are there right now. You are 6 years old or 49 years old or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever age of the experience we've gone back to. So we go right through the first moment of awareness of something peculiar happening, right through the whole experience. And I feel that my function is to to accompany them in a way. And very often, almost every time, I feel like I am there in that experience and it's happening now.
And do they feel like you're there too? Do they ever make comments about that?
Yes. Or they'll make comments later like, oh, thank goodness you were there with me. Really felt you there with me. And I say, well, I felt that too. Of course,
Wow.
I was certainly feeling like I was there. And depending, of course, on their description of everything. So my function largely is to accompany them, guide them, keep the experience going, and primarily to ask questions of them, like, what's happening now? Or what do you see now? Okay, is there anybody else in the room with you? Tell me what you're feeling. Tell me what you're thinking. And so we get a lot of detail. If the person finds himself on a like a cold, hard table, which often happens on what seems to be a round walled room, a curved wall. I have them describe the room that they find themselves in,
Mhm.
and taken onto the ship. And they'll usually say, oh, it's very, very light. It's very, very bright. And I say, well, notice where the light is coming from. And they'll say, well, I don't see where it's coming from. It's just very, very bright. And I say, well, what does the room seem like? I mean, does it seem a small room, medium, large room? And they'll describe whatever they find themselves to be in. And I'll say, what about the shape of the room? And they'll say, well, that's weird. I hadn't noticed that before, but there are no corners. There's
Hmm.
no edge where the wall meets the ceiling. It just seems to be sort of curved. Everything is curved. And then I'll say, is there anybody in this room with you? And they'll say, oh, yes, there are two beings over to the left side of me on the bed, and there are three on the right side. And I say, oh, okay, well, would you describe those? I mean, because at that point, I don't know whether they're people or extraterrestrials or whatever.
Right.
They always turn out to be extraterrestrials
Uh-huh.
in these cases, but so they'll describe them. There's usually a variety of beings around the table.
Hmm.
Some of them seem to be more medically interested in them and will seem to be giving them a medical checkup sort of thing. Now, the person might not like being sort of examined, poked, and probed, as they say. But when they realize that it's, oh yeah, it's kind of like my doctor back at home. They see, apparently they're checking my body. And if the beings are doing something that the person is really wondering about with their body,
Mhm.
the person's body, um, I'll say, well, you can ask them. And they say, really? And I'll say, yes, you can ask them out loud, what are you doing? Or you can ask in your mind, and they will pick up your thoughts. Usually they ask in their minds. And then they get an answer. And I tell them, okay, ask in your mind, and then just be receptive to whatever they might tell you. So they give a message back telepathically in the person's mind. And the person will repeat that to me. Like, for instance, the beings might say, we are checking your body to see if there's anything going wrong. Or they might say, oh, well, we've been checking your liver and we detect that there's a problem with your liver.
Hmm.
And therefore, when you go home again, we encourage you to go to your own human doctor and to ask him to check your liver, because we know there's a problem there. And apparently you have not discovered that yet.
Oh, wow.
So we'll often warn the person about something going on, which I think is a very helpful thing. And the person who's experiencing this will usually consciously not remember the details of this experience after the first few moments of the beings being in the room with them. However, they will subconsciously remember to call their doctor and ask for a checkup.
Hmm.
And they say, you know, I just sort of, for the first time, I'm aware of my liver. They don't consciously remember that they were on the ship and the beings told them to have the doctor check their liver, but they're just inspired after they get back. As a subconscious reminder, I think.
Yeah.
Call the doctor and ask to have their liver checked. And sure enough, in cases that I've worked with, when that sort of thing has happened, the person finds out, indeed, yes, they do have a problem with whatever the liver or whatever the problem was that the extraterrestrials have picked up on. So that happens a lot. And another thing that I think is even much more wonderful by far is that if the beings find something going wrong in the person's body, when they're in one of these medical checkups on board the UFO, they will just go right ahead and heal it right then and there. So people, well, gosh, I've worked with, at least 2,000 people, and some of them quite a number of times. So it's almost 5,000 regressions now since 1991 that I've done with people who experience these things. And so many of them have described different forms of healing. It usually involves some kind of light. It might be an overall light that is beaming down on them as they're on a medical table. It might be like a rod, like almost like a long flashlight with healing light. It might be, one woman described, it was like a rolling pin rolling up over her torso, a rolling pin of light.
Wow.
Or emitting light, rolling up over her torso and healing her while it went. Once in a while, they'll be healing from the hands of the beings, as we do our Reiki healers and hands-on healers do here on Earth. Anyway, there are many different methods of being healed by the beings on a ship. So there are some really drastic conditions that some people have been healed of, like cancer.
Really?
And even terminal cancer patients have been healed by the beings on the ship. So I think that's very impressive. And then all kinds of other things. Yeah, so the more we look into it, the more we realize that, oh, there's really a lot to this. That sometimes, very often, in fact, the beings seem to be really helping the person. The person, on the other hand, the person lying on the table with these unusual beings around him or her might be kind of freaking out.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I can imagine as you're guiding people in these sessions that you get to that point where you understand, oh, okay, they're helping me.
Yes.
But that's like after a little bit of time.
After it really happened.
Yeah. So how are most people? Are they scared when because you didn't start actually focusing on ETs in your training. You didn't know, this sort of came about over time, and now you've done a lot of them. Like you said, almost 5,000 or around 5,000, but and we're as a humanity, we're kind of evolving. For those who are interested in learning about ETs, it a lot of times it starts as a frightening thing, and then you do start to uncover more and more, like, actually there's a lot of assistance that we're getting.
Yes.
I can imagine as a person being regressed that, it's not immediately like, oh, good, I'm being abducted.
No, they usually don't feel that. It's more like,
right,
being taken away by these very unusual beings. I mean, so you see, a lot of people have had these experiences with the beings before they ever had heard that there was such a thing as these beings. Now, that's very, very typical. And so with children, it's very interesting because they have very few words for this sort of thing, that they'll wake up even as young as when they're in the crib. And then all here and there once in a while through childhood. And so after, some children are more okay with waking up in the middle of the night and seeing an unusual being there that whom they don't see anywhere else in their lives. And they sometimes give them nicknames like, oh, my Wookiee friend, okay, my Woodgie friend, or whatever, the childhood name for them. And usually when a child is very young, it will be a small being that comes to them, even short enough to look through the rungs of the crib at them. Like the very young child will roll over and look toward the side of the crib and then see through the crib. Oh, my little Wookiee friend is here. And sometimes those beings seem to come out of the closet. That happens a lot. And so we don't know why that is, but some people have suggested that maybe the closet, for some reason, is a portal between space or between our dimension and other dimensions. Because many times, these beings seem to be other dimensional. And sometimes the beings are so other dimensional that they seem to be almost a light form in a kind of a body shape, but just a being emanating light. Sometimes they seem to be more physical. It's a lot of variety in all of the variety of beings and variety of beings from other dimensions, even beyond the physical dimension.
Yeah. That's interesting you bring up the closet, because a friend of mine, my friend Lily, was just saying to me a couple weeks ago about closets and corners. And then you also talked about there aren't any corners when they're on the exam table and oh wait, actually there are no corners. So I feel like, yeah, on the spaceship, right? But do you also run into that where corners, where two walls meet? They emerge from that too?
Well, sometimes a person is taken at a corner where two walls meet and where those walls meet the ceiling. It's almost like a triple corner.
Okay.
And I had an experience once when that was the corner that I was taken through.
Really?
Yeah. And I had never heard of that until I had a regression on me by a colleague and realized that's the way I was taken out.
Oh, wow. Was that when you were a child?
No, it was in 1994 when I was fully adult.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I had actually asked for that experience.
Was this with the crop circles?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, if you want to share that story, that's remarkable. I would love to hear that story.
Okay. Well, 1991 was a really major year for me in my life. And that's when I began working with extraterrestrial experiencers and had about 4 or 5 of them suddenly in that one year. So I was really adjusting to that. And that was also the same year in the summer, 1991, that I began going to England to research the crop circle phenomenon, to be in as many as I could find and experience them, which was wonderful. I did that for 27 years, but I began in 1991. So in 1994, having been to England for 3 years at that point, and knowing that I was going again that summer, 1994, and probably would continue on and on after that. One of my experiencer clients who had many extraterrestrial experiences since she was a very little girl. Anyway, she also channeled an extraterrestrial being whom I got to be very conversant with because of many, many times that she channeled this wonderful being. And the being knew that I was very interested in crop circles and would be going to England again. So in the winter of 1994, in one of these channeling sessions, he said, Barbara, if you want to, you can be taken for the making of a crop circle. We realize how very fascinated you are and dedicated to researching this and letting people know about it. So I thought, oh, wow, my goodness, that's really interesting opportunity, but I don't know what that would involve, And anyway, I thought about it for several months, and about 6 months later, I was getting ready to go to England for visiting crop circles that summer. And the channeling happened again. And I said, I've been thinking about it all this time. I've gotten through my fear. I just didn't know what to expect, and didn't know if I'd be returned to the right place I'd be staying in. And, I just wasn't really ready to accept that. But now I feel like it would be okay. How do I help bring this about? And he said, well, good for you. And then he said, you have to talk to them out loud, the beings. You don't know who they are. You won't picture any particular type, but just talk as if you're addressing yourself to the beings who actually make the crop circles, which validated what I had felt all along, was that they were coming from out there somehow, from some intelligence out there. And so he said, you just have to really convince them. You have to talk out loud, keep it going for a while, not just one little sentence, and convince them that you really want to have that experience and you would be honored if they would take you. So when I was driving to Los Angeles airport at that time, and I was on the freeway for about 45 minutes and was talking to the beings out loud, not knowing whom I was talking to. But I noticed that as I was talking to them and driving, that I was getting more and more energized, more and more enthused, and I was praising them for making these beautiful patterns and for the way that they were laying down the wheat or whatever the crop was, and in such a perfect way, these perfect designs and with special energy in them. And what a wonder, what a gift to the earth and gift to humanity. And I found that I was going on and on and on, said way more than I had ever expected to say, but it was all very positive and very honoring of them. And then every once in a while I would say, so if you would take me for the making of a crop circle, I would be extremely grateful and happy. I would honor that so much. So anyway, then I got to the airport and flew to England and forgot about it completely for about 3 or almost 4 weeks. And then suddenly the last night before the last day of going out and visiting crop circles, I realized as I was getting into bed that, oh my gosh, I don't think anything like that has happened. I think I might be aware of a little bit of it. And so I asked again. And then almost immediately, within a minute, I could see 3 short beings coming toward me from the area of the window. They looked like they were the same size, the same shape, sort of bigger heads and little necks and little bodies. And they were coming toward me. And then the next thing I knew, I was out of consciousness. I thought I had slept through the night and
Did
woke
you
up.
consciously remember seeing those 3, or was that through the regression that you could remember that?
No, I consciously remembered seeing them.
Oh, wow.
And nothing after that, after
Uh-huh.
they approached the bed. And
Okay.
as they approached the bed, I lifted my head from the pillow to get a better look at them. I could just see them as silhouettes because there was some night light behind them coming in through the window. No light in the room. And so when I lifted my head from the pillow, they seemed to, all three of them, just sort of back up a bit. So I put my head back down on the pillow and closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep. And then they came. I could see, I just opened one eye a little tiny bit, could see that they were advancing toward me again. So I closed that eye, and then boom, I didn't know anything till the alarm clock went off a few hours later in the morning. So I didn't know that that experience had actually happened. However, and I think this is really a wonderful synchronicity, the next morning I was with a big group of people. We were part of a conference where I was a speaker about crop circles. And we got in a big double-decker bus and we drove 45, 50 minutes to a place we were going to visit that day. And I was up on the top deck because I always wanted to look around and while going along to see if there were any new crop circles. And indeed, as we got almost to our destination in the bus, I could see that there was a field that we had been by the day before. And I recognized that particular field because it had two of the very tall megalithic stones standing in it. And then a wall of brick houses beyond, the end of the field. So I recognized that field, and there was a depression in the wheat that was growing there. And I thought, oh my gosh, that might be a new crop circle. So as soon as the bus I was in stopped, I ran down, jumped off the bus, and went to a friend who was following in a rented car and said, guess what? I think right back there, about a half a mile, there's a new crop circle. And she said, well, get in, let's go, into her rented car. And two other ladies happened to hear this and they said, oh, can we come? Can we come? So we left the whole group, went back, found a way to get into the field on the tractor track. They call them tramway lines. They have nicer words for so many things.
Yeah.
They're nicer words. And as we walked along the tramway line into a beautiful, fresh, new, vibrant, with energy crop circle. And it turned out, make a long story short, that after I got home and had a colleague regress me to that night of seeing the beings coming toward me, that was the very crop circle that I had been taken for the making of. Wow. So that was just wonderful. There's a color picture of that crop circle in my book, Crop Circles Revealed. So that was a really wonderful experience. And that allowed me to know, because see, I've been learning all the time. I learn new things about these beings. So it's always fresh for me. It's always new. And it's always something a little bit more than what I had realized before from other people's experiences and mine. And so I realized that, for one thing, they are the ones who make at least some of the crop circles, which I had thought. And that was a nice validation. And that, we can really communicate with them if we want to. So if anybody wants to hear from them or talk to them or be with them, and many people ask me if I think that's possible. I say, yes, I do think it's possible because it happened to me. Yeah. But I think for anybody who wants contact with them or wants to get messages from them without really having contact, because there are a lot of people like that, I suggest that they talk to them without being able to necessarily picture who they're talking to or what they look like. but talk and be sincere and really mean it. You have to really mean it. And I think that you have to convince them that you mean it and stay with it for a while, because I would guess that they might not tune in while you're doing this. They might not tune in right away. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
You might be half an hour into it and then they click in and they pick it up and they would respond to it. So so don't just say, "Oh, please take me," and that's it.
Yeah, right. Well,
Well,
this
I'm
comes
really amazed at the number of people whom I've met who not I have not worked with them, I've not regressed them, but I've still met many, many people who would dearly love to be able to talk to them.
Mhm.
Some people would even really love to have experiences of going out into space with them.
Yeah.
And yet, probably, I would guess, most people on the earth say, "Oh, no,
Yeah.
no, I don't want that kind of experience." Yeah,
Right. Well, that goes back to, first of all, thank you for sharing that about the crop circle experience, because that is such a beautiful story on so many levels, like what you're talking about, where there was the exchange, and
yeah,
your request was heard and answered, and then just the phenomenon. I mean, crop circles are just so compelling and
yeah.
and amazing. But at the end, you're bringing up this point that I didn't get to I didn't let you finish, about the fear and the complete experience that does start with, okay, I've been abducted, or this realization. How do people feel about that, and what are the reveals that come through that?
Well, there are many, many different feelings that different people have about this. Some people are curious. They have various clues that something peculiar like this, something unknown, has been happening to them. For instance, they'll notice that sometime and this could be at any age, they'll notice that there's an unusual marking on their skin. It might be a perfect triangle, and that perfect triangle might be looking like it's a series of little pinprick dots forming a perfect triangle. And that could be anywhere on their body, could even be on their back, and whomever they're living with might see it, and they might not ever detect it themselves because it's on their back. Or it might be what look like fingertip bruises, or it might be a straight line of what looks like pinprick dots, or the triangle might sometimes be a bruise, like a perfect triangular shaped bruise, particularly on the abdomen and particularly with females. It could be a scoop shaped mark, as if there'd been a little scoop shaped tool that took some flesh out of the person, but didn't go through all 7 layers of the skin to cause bleeding. Probably stopped just short of that last layer of skin. But like a bit of flesh has been removed. Or it might be a pure straight line white scar. I know 2 people who had that. So it might be a circle of pinprick marks and then a ring, perfect design around that circle. So there are things like this, and odd bruises here and there, but particularly the ones that have a defined shape that we recognize. When a person wakes up or is showering and notices, that's inciting a lot of curiosity. Well, where did this come from?
Right.
What's this? How did I get that? I couldn't have done that in my sleep,
Yeah.
So there will be things like that will get people to wonder. And then there's always the missing time experience that many, many experiencers have. So they were They might be indoors doing something, they might be outdoors, they might be driving in a car, and then suddenly it seems a little different, like if they're driving a car. Very frequently they will have a sense that, or see that either in front of them up in the sky, fairly close, there's an unusual looking craft or light shining down at them, or it might be they see that through the mirror view mirror or the side window, and then the car motor starts to sort of peter out, and they think, oh, the car is dying, so they'll pull off the road, fortunately. And then usually that light had come from a craft, and the craft has come closer or landed, and beings will come. And even if the doors to the car are locked, they'll just open the doors. We don't know how they do these things, but they do them, and then take the person out. If the person has a companion, the companion is usually what we call switched off, which means just they're not harmed in any way, but they're just made to be unconsciously aware, no conscious awareness at all. Just like the companion in bed might be switched off for the duration of the visit.
Encounter, yeah.
And the person, the experiencer, will be just taken out of the car and taken onto the ship, and the ship leaves. It usually goes up in the sky where we don't see it. And then all kinds of things can happen to the person on the ship. And then suddenly the person realizes they're back in the car again. Oh, wow. And it's an hour and a half or 2 hours later. So a person, I mean, that definitely gets somebody's attention.
Yeah.
It turns out that the car is functioning perfectly again. Nothing's been ruined in the motor of the car, so that's good. Yeah, but those kinds of experiences happen, and often experiencers will be in any kind of situation, even with other people right around them,
Really?
and suddenly have an hour and a half or 2 of missing time. Then, or very often somebody will be driving along in a car, very often with a companion in the car, and they'll suddenly be at their destination, but it's a couple of hours later than they should have arrived there. It's a classic missing time experience. And then I've known of a couple of people who were driving along a Southern California freeway, going in one direction, and then a missing time experience happened. And when they were put back in their car, they noticed that the car was going in the opposite direction of the freeway. That's happened with 2 different people I know.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I would think you would think you're losing your mind at that point. But these are the triggers that people have that make them think like, maybe I need a regression.
Yes.
Want to figure out what's happened.
Oh, this is really strange. So, and then, I mean, it can take years, and it often does take years before the person will have tried to find out what happened. I mean, how could that happen? And I mean, it might be decades
Really?
that a person will wonder about a peculiar experience they've had. And then gradually, maybe they hear about these kinds of things and put that together in their own mind. Oh, wow, maybe that's what happened back in 1953, when I was on this highway going a certain place. So they remember those details because they were so peculiar.
Yeah.
And when they come to me, they say, well, I'd like to know what happened that night. It was back in 1953, and I was on my way from Oregon to Idaho, and and suddenly my car and I were going in the opposite direction, or we got to my destination much later, an hour or two later than I had expected to. And nowadays it's interesting because so many people travel to new places by GPS or cell phones or their other device. And the GPS will tell them how long it's expected to take to get to that destination. So they have that kind of as a proof, shall we say, on the GPS. And then when they get there at a different time, especially an hour or two later than the GPS had said, and yet they know they hadn't run into a lot of traffic or an accident or anything. They put that together, think, oh, well, what could have happened in all that time? So it's really interesting to know that those kinds of missing time experiences, in other words, visitations and removals by the beings, can happen even when the person is right there in a group of people.
That is fascinating.
You wouldn't think that,
right.
But it does many times. So, for instance, I worked with a woman who went back in the regression to a college experience. She was in her middle years when she came to me, but she'd always wondered about that one particular night when she was in college, and she was in somebody's home in a party with other college students. And they had beer and they were smoking cigarettes and they had music on. And during regular college party. And then what they had not realized was that a UFO had landed in the field across the street, and 3 beings had come in through the front door and taken this one female college student, my client, switched everybody in the room off. And that meant that anybody who was picking up a glass of beer, it was on their way
suspended,
just frozen there.
Oh, wow.
Suspended. Or anybody picking up a cigarette to smoke it, or putting a cigarette out, or reaching for something, or getting up to dance with the music or whatever, that right in mid-act they were frozen. There, not harmed in any way. And then the college girl, was taken for the experience for an hour and a half or so. And then the beings brought her back, came in through the front door, seated her back where she had been on the sofa. And as they left, everyone kind of came to. So the beer glass continued to go up to be consumed. The cigarette had already burned out and was just a little stub in the person's hand and so forth. And the person who was on their way to getting up to dance continued to get up. The music had stopped by then, and they all realized it was much later. Same thing happened in a big insurance company in New York City, with one of those big, huge open offices with different people working in different cubicles. One afternoon, the elevator doors opened. 3 beings came into this office room, took one woman who was working there, switched off everybody else in that big room full of cubicles and people. And then after a period of time, the woman was brought back to her cubicle, put right back in her chair by her desk, and everybody sort of came to. And then people were gradually saying, how did the afternoon go so fast? Or I would have thought it was about 3 o'clock, but my watch says it's 5 o'clock. Or other people, where did the time fly? My goodness, this was the fastest afternoon I've ever been here. They hadn't realized, of course, what had happened.
Yeah.
Who had been taken was astonished that it was a couple of hours later than she would have thought it should be.
But
Yeah.
there must have been something with each of those clients where they recognized something peculiar and wanted to revisit it in regression. Was it
Yeah.
the missing time? Was that the trigger for them?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
This was a few years ago, but definitely something. It could have been the missing time, or it could have been that she had some new markings on her body, or
All right.
something that definitely brought her attention to it that she'd wondered about for several years, and then finally found me to come to
Yeah.
regression to find out the details. And
Yeah.
then another client was one afternoon on the beach, was a beach party with a group of people, 10 or 12 people. They all had their beach chairs and blankets set out and everything. And then she suddenly was inspired to get up and walk away from the people she was with, walk down to the far end of the beach. She didn't know why. I mean, she was very happy they were talking to the people and drinking cold drinks and having a good old time. But she got up and she just felt compelled to walk down toward the other end of the beach. And when she was at quite a distance from her people who stayed where they were, she was taken and had a whole experience and was brought back later to the end of the beach and then walked back to rejoin her people, wondering why she had left the group she was really having fun with, why she'd left the group to walk down to the other end of the beach, and
Huh.
didn't realize that, what had happened.
Yeah.
So these beings really have, from our point of view, miraculous abilities.
Yeah.
Take people and bring them back and not harm them. Now, I want to say that as mysterious and often frightening as this is to many people, many of them do find in the regression that it turns out to be a very hopeful and useful experience. And they're sometimes very grateful to the beings.
Mm.
So that's wonderful for those people. And more, excuse me,
Oh, bless you.
suddenly very activated. um, okay, more and more people are coming with a sense that they are having very loving, positive, excuse me.
Bless you.
So more and more people are coming to me to find out the details of experiences that they've had, because they have a very strong sense that they're connected somehow with some very loving beings, unconditionally loving beings. And they welcome their contacts with those beings. And they want to know more about them. And they want to know more of what that relationship is and why they are in contact with them. So they have experiences which we could think of as abductions. But these, they don't even want to use that word for these experiences. They might say visits, they might say encounters, they might say meetings with. Oh, I had a meeting with my special beings a few nights ago, and I want to know more details about it. I want to know what they said. Because often it seems like those experiences with these loving beings are to sort of positively recharge them and very often help them to carry out their mission here on Earth, the person's mission. So very often these people feel like there's a special connection between them and their beings. Frequently, these people call them star beings, my star beings. which is a much nicer word than aliens. They don't
Yeah.
think of being aliens. They think of them as being really, really special beings, my star beings, and of a wonderful dimension, and coming from a very loving realm. And they want these experiences, and they want to know about experiences with them that they've already had. So that seems to be that more and more people are waking up to the fact that they have these kinds of experiences and
Yeah.
more about it. And very frequently, those people I'm talking about receive messages in their lives from the beings, particularly if they're meditators. Sit down and relax and meditate frequently. When they're in the meditation, they'll receive, sometimes they call it a download, receive messages from the beings. It's not necessarily a back and forth conversation, but they actually are receiving very helpful, positive messages from those beings. And so more and more people are coming to me with a sense that they're here on a mission. They're not quite sure what that mission is. It might be teaching, it might be physical healing, it might be channeling of the beings, it could be any number of things. And they might already be doing some of that, but they want clarity and validation for the experiences they're having with the beings and what that mission is that they have agreed with those very fine beings to be doing here on Earth. So many people who are finding me these years and these days are people who really want to know more about that. It's astonishing to me that in this last year or two, I've had so many people, when they email me, I have not been aware of them, but they find me online, or they call me, or they text me, and they say, I've been guided to you to find out more about why I am really here in this life. And that's what they come, and we go into that in the regression. Those regressions very often involve what I tell them will be their higher self, their higher knowing, their soul knowing, and it involves the other beings. So very often in those regressions, it's not that we're focusing on what happened, but we're focusing on the communications with those higher beings. And it's very meaningful for the person. And sometimes they realize in those sessions that they're actually already doing their mission, whether it's physical healing or teaching or disseminating information about the beings, or whatever their particular mission is. They get validation from these regressions and being in touch with their star beings. That, yes, this is what they're supposed to be doing. Keep on doing it. Do it more. That's why they're on Earth. So that's very reassuring and very helpful for people. And then there are people who come who do not have a sense that they have anything to do with star beings or any kind of beings. And they just simply wonder why they chose to come into this life. And what are they supposed to be doing? Now, these people are usually at least in their 50s, maybe 60s, 70s, even 80s in a few cases. And, it's time to get on with whatever they came to do.
Right.
And they don't know what that is. And so we'll do a regression to that to go back to their soul knowing. And the soul, well, what happens is that there's sort of a reenactment of their being a soul with other souls to guide them, and considering and deciding to come into this incarnation. And that's very interesting because they can see why they chose that particular family and that race to be part of, and that culture and that part of the world. And then the main point, so that's all very, very interesting to them. And primarily, they value finding out the main reason why they came into this life. So it was explained to me years ago by a very wise non-terrestrial being that when we come into a lifetime, it's almost like signing up to go to college or university, and that there will be a main subject that we will be majoring in. And then there will be all these elective subjects. So that's true if we go on to higher education.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same way in life, that our soul, with the help of other souls discussing these things, decide to come in and have a major thing that we're coming in for. And then we have these elective things, like we might be learning about communication, or learning how to have a good relationship, or how to have a good relationship with an animal, a pet, or how to make money, how to experience success without developing a lot of ego, or any number of things that we find ourselves involved with. Or it might include being with a particular person whom we have been with in previous lifetimes, but in a different role in this lifetime. And that has reasons for it too. It's very, very helpful to see these things.
Yeah.
Like, I need to learn forgiveness. And so I will be with this particular person, and something will go very, very wrong, and I will be very hurt. And then I will have the opportunity to learn to forgive that person.
Yeah.
So it can be very helpful to get that whole perspective. And I find that more and more people are coming for those reasons. And I think they're just really wonderful.
Yeah.
By the way, I just want to say that as we're talking, I'm seeing your aura around your head and shoulders, and it is so bright. It's this beautiful light blue, and sometimes takes on sort of a light greenish tint, and it's moving. The aura moves all the time. It's more thick over here, and then more pronounced over there, and then there'll be a bloop over here, and then it evens out, and it's just very, very active.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah,
How fun is that?
yeah. Right. And I hadn't been aware of seeing it, but as I was just talking with you, I just thought, wow, I've got to comment on this. I mean, it is
Oh,
so bright, so beautiful, so
wow.
dazzling.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
this
much.
lovely
Wow.
blue, and then sometimes a light blue green, and
That's,
a little bit of faint yellow over to that side
huh.
right now. Yeah, so
I
it
don't
helps.
see
It helps me when there's a plain wall,
Oh,
a
yeah.
very light wall, plain wall behind a person. That's
Uh-huh.
fun to see them. Yeah,
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you.
yeah.
Oh,
So many people, if I've commented about their auras, say, "Oh, teach me how to see an aura." But it's very easy, I think, and I learned just by chance. It just happened years ago, and I think the ingredient that really helps is that instead of looking at the details of the face of the person you're looking at. Don't look specifically at their eyes, their nose, their mouth, their expression, whatever. Just sort of gaze at the face of the person. So it's a soft
gaze.
soft gaze.
Uh-huh.
And then it should, at least that's how I find
Yeah.
that it happens. And then you see this light. Very often it will start, in my experience, seeing auras, it will start with kind of a thin layer of fairly white light, and then it will develop bigger and into colors. And with the same person, it might be quite a different color as we go on, or from time to time.
How interesting.
Different situations.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense, right? Depending on the state that you're in, especially with energy, because it is dynamic.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, that's great. You're doing well.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Not
What a
only
fun surprise.
beautiful person, beautiful
Oh,
appearance too, but you have this beautiful aura.
oh,
That
wow.
right after I said that, it got very, very white. And that
Oh, wow.
blue with little slightly yellow edges to it. They're not really edges, but the outermost part.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. That's amazing.
Oh, you're welcome. So it's been very interesting working with couples. I was licensed in 1973 as a psychotherapist and have done many years of psychotherapy work. And some of that work has been with couples. And so I would be sitting opposite, usually the couples would be sitting on my sofa against a plain, sort of very light beige wall. And I would be sitting in a chair opposite them. So it was a perfect setup. And I hadn't planned it that way, but it just turned out to be that way. And after a while, working with the couples, I noticed that, oh yeah, I was seeing their auras. And usually, well, if the couple was having a lot of difficulties, which they probably would, or they wouldn't have come to me for counseling anyway, that one person's aura would be a certain color, and the other person in the couple, that person's aura would be a very different color. That they would interact. So, like, her aura might move over a little bit closer to his might even retreat out the other side of his head, and then it would kind of go back and forth, and the colors of the auras would mingle.
How about
So
that?
they didn't necessarily physically move closer, but the auras did, depending on what they were doing, talking about each other or to each other. And so that was very interesting. So there was one couple who came, and the young woman, her aura was bright white, just gorgeous. And the husband's aura was darkish brown gray. The only person I've ever seen a grayish brown aura on. And as her white aura would move over to his brown aura would really move away. Like he didn't really, really want contact with her, even in the energy field.
Wow.
And then hers would withdraw again. And hers would, after moments like that, hers would sort of dim down a bit. And then as I was talking further with her, it would amplify and brighten, and his would get more brown. Well, I guessed from that, as well as things that they were saying, that, I don't think this couple is really going to stay together for life.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that it was, in my opinion, appropriate, because they were on such different energy and consciousness levels.
Right.
Yeah. So
And
that,
to your point, there must have been something there between them that was, that they had for each other for that time that they were together.
together and got married.
Right?
I mean, there definitely was something. And I think this was many years ago, actually, but that I worked with them, but kind of from hindsight, um, I would guess that her getting together with him had a lot of empathy in it,
Mm.
that she hoped that she could sort of lighten and brighten him up.
Mhm.
He probably was very drawn to her because she was this being with so much more light, and he wanted that, he needed that.
Mhm.
And probably she made him feel better
Yeah.
when they were together than when he was by himself.
Yeah.
Combination, I think, was just not going to be one that would last for a lifetime.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was too bad.
That's that's fascinating to see it at all, to see the auras at all.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to have some experiences like that too. I'm not a very, that's not been my strong suit where I can see energy or anything, but it's starting to open up more and more. And so, and that soft gaze, like what you talk about,
Oh, good.
is like so imperative. And it also makes me realize like I've been having these flashes of memories, but they're or knowings. They're not even so much memories, but like, oh, this is how it is as a child.
Ah,
And our we sharpen our vision as we get older, because if you think about it, like you go to the eye doctor and it's like, you see this letter, from a distance, and it's like
yeah.
we're looking for that sharp focus. Well, when you're looking with the soft gaze and you're looking at a more complete, if you're looking at a tree and you're looking at the tree beyond the definition of the physical tree, you're looking at it with a soft gaze, but it's kind of blurry, because
Yeah,
you're not looking at it sharply. And I
right.
feel like this is something that I don't remember seeing auras, but I just sort of like feel like it was an indoctrination of like, oh, this is how you look with physical eyes. This is how you see things. Like you sharpen it, you look for the edges, and you like
Yeah,
notice where things end and start and things like that.
we're
And
very accustomed to that. And
yeah,
I think we're almost taught that as well.
right.
Look at the letters on the blackboard,
Yeah.
look at the numbers. And
Yeah.
that's a very defined, fine-tuned kind of looking. So
Yes.
one time years ago, I was in a lovely outdoor place on sort of a slope. There were big trees in the distance and some gently rolling hills over there in the distance. And I was just very relaxed and talking with my friend, and just noticed that I was seeing all these auras of the trees as I was looking up, and that the hills had a beautiful aura over them. And I asked my friend, "Do you see that?" And he didn't. But um, wow, I mean, that I can remember that whole afternoon. I was just dazzled by these nature forms and the earth itself, just glowing with this aura of energy.
Wow.
It was really nice. And
That's
I,
so
if I
beautiful.
had tried to see it, I probably wouldn't have. But I was just very relaxed and talking and having that soft gaze. And
Yeah.
just, it was. I mean, there it
That's
was all the time anyway, but I just hadn't seen it.
That's what it is so funny about it. Is so many of these reveals where it's like, oh my God, it's always here, you know?
Yes, we did. I just didn't know it.
Yes, yes. I feel that way like when I look at the sky, if I give myself just time, just like you're saying, in a relaxed state with a soft gaze, and you just start to see these like pinpricks of, sparkly, like but they're just very fast. It's like sparkle, 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 sparkle. And they'll, it just as soon as you can even see it, it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's like they're everywhere and they're always there, but I just don't always see them, but it's like, it's like if I just can like bring my focus in at the right level, then there they are. And it's not like, oh, they've arrived. It's like, oh, I'm here now. Like I arrived.
This is it.
Right.
When I was a child, and my parents used to take me skiing, snow skiing up in Canada. And those were the days when we did not have chairlifts, but we had a J bar. We'd just come down, and you'd sit on the part of the J bar. So I'd ride up by myself and ride up the mountain. And of course, there was snow completely on the ground. And I would notice it was sort of a very relaxed reverie time riding up this ski lift between skiing down. And I've noticed very often, this went on for years actually, when skiing, and I'd noticed that between me and the snow down there on the ground, which was sort of an uphill, that there were, that the air was filled with these little, it seemed like transparent circles with a little dot in them.
Oh.
That all I could, because of the snow, I could see it very clearly. It was like all that plain white.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and they were always moving around, sort of dancing around. Very, very pretty. And I don't know what those were, but it happened for years, going to that ski place and going up the lift. I would see that and figured that if I can see it here, it probably means they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know if it's energy or what it is, but it was always lovely. I just sort of, when I go back the first time the next year and go up the ski lift and see oh yeah, these are my friends. They felt friendly. They felt perfectly okay. It was part of reality that I saw only there in that situation.
That's
And
magical.
and again, year after year, I did that for 6 years. So I figured, this must be part of the way it is, part of reality. If these are here every year and every ride up the hill.
Right.
I see these things. That must be here to stay.
Right. Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Well,
nobody knew what I was talking about.
yeah.
Many things.
I know
That's
what that's like.
here.
Yeah.
Our parents would, be okay. They were polite.
Right.
Say unusual things like that. Like, for instance, but they didn't know what I was talking about, but I don't think. But I remember when very young, probably age 4 or so, standing in our dining room and touching the hard windowsill and touching the very hard dining table and saying to my mother, what else is there? I know there's something more than all this.
Oh.
She didn't, I don't blame her, but she had no idea what I was talking about. I was really talking about reality and other dimensions, but I didn't know it.
Yeah.
I just knew there was something so much more than the physical world.
Yeah. And you remember that, or she would tell you that later?
No, I remember it.
You do. Wow.
Yeah. And there really wasn't an answer for it.
Right.
I didn't really, I think at the time, expect an answer, but it certainly was evident to me that I was wondering about reality, and is there something other than this den? That's why I was patting these.
Yeah.
They're still on the table. They were so hard and
Right.
firm and so physical, so dense, so there. And
Yeah.
I just knew that there was a lot more beyond that, but I just didn't know what it was or even how to ask about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's so amazing how children, how, it's kind of like we come in with so much and then we sort of whittle it down as we learn how to be human, It's like,
Yes.
oh, we just accept that when we're human, it's like, don't think about
Yeah.
that.
And of course, as a child, I never thought of not being human.
Right.
I
Yeah.
did, I think I did sort of wonder where we came from before
Yeah.
here.
Mhm.
It's a little bit of a sense of that. But then again, there wasn't anybody to talk to about that.
Yeah. I
I'd say,
remember.
I don't know.
Yeah. I remember that too. I remember thinking like, where was I before here? And then also time. I thought for so long I would get stuck. Like, what was before time?
Oh,
What
well,
was before time? And it was like, well, God, and I knew like God was before time. But it was like, but what was before God? Like, how did God get there? And I would just like go around and around and around. And I just I couldn't solve it. I couldn't solve it. I'm still working on that.
probably, I would say you probably still haven't.
Right.
Yeah. But I remember, okay, sort of wondering, sensing that I didn't even think in terms of dimensions, but I just knew there was something else.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that. And oh gosh, it wasn't until well into my adult life, decades into my adult life, that I began to really think about and hear about other dimensions
Yeah.
of reality and other dimensional beings. And that, oh, I really welcomed that. Kind of like, I knew it.
Yeah.
I've always known that. I didn't cognitively know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it
Right.
was this very deep recognition and gratefulness that this was being talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I was wondering about.
Right. Well, I feel like in your work, I mean, you've been a pioneer in this space of ufology and experiencers and you've been that for so many people where it's like, oh my God, somebody's talking about it, somebody's revealing it, somebody's
Yes.
helping us to form this picture that where we had all these missing pieces. Like I had like one piece of the puzzle and now, oh my God, I found Barbara Lamb and she's helping me to put these other pieces so that I can make sense of what's happened. So
Yes.
it's really, I mean, it's fun to hear you talk about how it's like, oh my God, yes, multidimensionality, but then it's like, yes. And also, how many people have you done that for? It's like countless because they're your clients, but then also through your books and your appearances and conferences and so forth that, it's imperative what you've been doing. So thank
Well, thank you. Well, I would like to say that back in 1983, before I even knew there was such a thing as regression,
you.
hypnotic regression, before that, didn't even know there existed such a thing. But I was very inspired to go to a workshop run by a weekend workshop run by a woman named Helen Wambach. And Helen Wambach had us lying on mats on the floor, those of us who attended the workshop, and she would lead us into one previous lifetime. And it could be any time period that we chose. and to find out if we'd had a past life in that time period. And like she would mention a bunch of time period. There's the early 20th century, there's the 1800s, 1900s, 1700s, 1600s, the year 1000, back before Christ, 2000 years before Christ, 3000 years, so on. And then she'd say, just take whichever one you seem to resonate with as I say that. And that's the one that you will go to in a regression. So she would do the relaxation part, the induction. And then she'd say, okay, be in that time period and just notice whatever you notice. And we had pads of paper and a pen right next to us. And she said, remember the details, remember the weather, the climate, the place in the world it seemed to be, whether you were male, whether you were female, more or less what you were doing, what was your home like if you had a home, what was the furniture like, what were the utensils like, what was the cooking apparatus you had. So he kept asking all these detailed questions. And as she would ask them, we individually, without saying anything out loud, without reporting what we were seeing, we just kept seeing more and more details. And then she'd say, go to the most important thing that happened in that lifetime. And boom, there would be this scenario that would come up. So she did that with 6 different lifetimes, which was extremely interesting.
Yeah.
And then she said, those of you who would like to could do a regression to go back to your soul, and your soul's deciding to come into this lifetime.
Wow.
And she said, would any of you like to do that? And I said, yes.
Yeah, right.
Why I came. And some other people didn't, but there were 2 or 3 of us who did. So related, she said, the rest of you just, lie on your mat and take a little nap or whatever you want, go get a drink of water. But, those of you who want to just go into that. So I went back to being a soul, considering coming into this lifetime, and which was a very interesting process of why I chose the race to be female, to grow up in the New York City area, to grow up with those particular parents and that particular brother, and on and on. And what was the point of choosing them to be with? And all of it, I got immediate answers to everything. And then she said, which was very meaningful, I still often think of that from 1983.
Wow.
Yeah, that is so meaningful to me. And then she said, now let yourself see the main reason why you're going to enter that lifetime. And immediately I knew, oh, it's to show people how it really is. And by that I meant that there's this huge realm of souls that now and then choose to come into lifetimes for particular reasons. It's like this vast, vast realm full, millions of souls who would at various times choose to be incarnated. And not only that, but behind me, I sense there's an even larger realm of souls who were beings who were not human beings, but they were in the spirit realm. And I couldn't see them. And at that time, I did not know about extraterrestrials. So I had no
frame of reference,
words for it.
Yeah.
But there's these other beings that are just as real as the souls who are going to be incarnated at various times. And that's what I'm coming into this lifetime to share. So that was 1983. Little did I know that I would even be doing regression work which I've done ever since 1984, training in past life regression therapy, and certainly didn't know that there even was such a thing as the extraterrestrials, or that I would be working with people who experience them. But somehow in that soul visitation or regression to my soul, I knew that.
Wow.
It turns out that for many years now, I have been very, very involved in that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What a
I
blessing.
still do past life regressions, which are
Really?
wonderful and very helpful.
Yeah.
Mostly nowadays, I'm doing the extraterrestrial
Mhm.
regressions, or connecting people with their star families,
Yes.
and they want that experience.
Right.
Yeah. So it's very wonderful. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah. I mean,
Consider myself just amazingly blessed
you've
to
had a
be able to do
very,
this.
yeah, very blessed
Yeah.
life. And how lucky are we that you are fulfilling your purpose, because it's not a given, and you had a very big calling. So thank you for
Yeah.
heeding the call.
Well, thank you. And you're so welcome. It's been an enormous goodness, enormous pleasure for me. I feel privileged.
Yes,
I feel
absolutely.
privileged. Anyway, I always did as a therapist. I felt very privileged that these people would somehow find me and come to me. And then, so that's been through all of this, but um, especially I feel privileged when somebody comes to me for these explorations,
Yeah,
different beings, different dimensions, often
right.
different amazing experiences that they've had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that part of my openness has been the serendipity of having um, several out of body experiences myself
Mm,
before that, like in the one in 1969, and then several around the end of the 1970s and early 80s.
mhm.
And they were always very spontaneous. They would happen when I certainly wasn't thinking of doing that sort of thing, but and always when I was very, very relaxed.
Oh,
And I'd suddenly feel myself leaving my body. Sometimes I'd be aware of where I went. Sometimes I wouldn't. I just know I was not there for a while. And
yeah.
I'd always feel myself re-entering my body. And so I think that those kinds of experiences were very fortuitous, because it meant that I was realizing that, from those experiences, that we are much more than our physical bodies.
Right.
And that wasn't just an idea I had heard. It
Yeah.
was, a reality that I continue to experience from time to time.
Yeah.
Oh, this is true. We are not always here in the physical body. We are much more, and that when we're out there, we're very, very conscious.
Right.
I mean, it is the me, the I, and yet without a body, but it's
Right.
the real me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
lately, I've been dealing with a broken femur bone
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
right up by my hip, where I've had complications anyway. And so one of the gifts that there have been many difficulties with that, but many gifts too.
Mhm.
And one of the gifts is that I realize and think of it from time to time, that I, the real me, is not this body that's hurting a lot.
Mm.
That I am something else, and I'm in this body, this physical body that hurts every time I take a step.
Yeah.
getting a little bit better as time goes on, but still it's there, definitely. And so that's been a wonderful reminder, because I knew that before, that I am not my body. I'm just in a body. And that's true for all of us, of course.
Yeah.
And I am an ongoing, continuing consciousness who chose to be in this particular body in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And that I'm hopefully learning lessons
Right.
in this body in this lifetime, including this particular chapter, which is a more difficult chapter of being in this body.
Right.
And
Yeah.
also I'm extremely aware that I will not always be in this body.
Right.
There'll be a time when I'll be leaving it for good, not just another out of body experience, but I'll be really saying goodbye to it and to this whole life, which I'm not eager to live by any means, because I really like and appreciate this life I'm in. But I know that will be happening, and there'll be many other chapters elsewhere
Right.
after that. So it's certainly not an ending that will be coming along at some point, but
A new
a
beginning.
new beginning and a new and an old familiarity, I think,
I think, yeah.
of being
Wow.
up there. Yeah. As many people say, people who've had the near-death experiences, they often say, reporting on that afterwards, they say, "Oh, I felt like I was really home." That
Yes.
other dimension, that other realm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, Barbara, I don't know where our time went. Maybe we had some lost time. What's that?
It flew.
It did fly. It flew. It has just been a wonderful, wonderful honor to have you. And I've had a blast. This has been so much fun. And we talked about like this much of what I had on my list. So you are welcome to come back anytime. The door is wide open for you. It would be such a joy.
Well, I'd be happy to.
Oh, I would love that. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, and I will let you get on with your day, but I truly, truly have loved every second of this. Thank you so much.
I have too.
Thank you.
Wonderful to know you. You are a very bright light.
Oh, thank you
Bright,
so
beautiful
much.
light. Your aura is still bright as ever.
Oh, thank you. Bless you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.